Hello guys and welcome back. Today I am actually doing 4 reviews. I'll get to that in a minute. So you will see this look over the course of my channel. Bear with me. Why do I have 4 reviews? One, because I simply didn't have time to sit down and do them. Two, because I got sick. And what do you do when you're sick? You read. I'm still not feeling super well. This is the best time I had to do these reviews, so here we go. I do have my notebook because you need a notebook when you have 4 reviews. And one of these books I read like 3 weeks ago. So again, bear with me. I am going to start with Love is Higher Than Law by David Levithan. I was not very impressed by this book. The best thing about Love is Higher Than Law is that it was very short. Going into it, I was unimpressed. Granted, I was sick and I was pretty delirious, so it probably wasn't as bad as I thought it was, but I felt like the tone was super juvenile. It is a YA novel, as you can guess. It is about 9/11, and it focuses around 3 characters, Claire, Peter, and Jasper. And they are New Yorkers, they are New York teenagers, and they witness 9/11 on the day of. And so we get to see them on the day of and then in the time afterwards. I liked this idea because it's very hard to find books on 9/11. It's especially hard to find fiction about 9/11. So holy cow, I hope my series works out well and you guys like it because it's such an important topic. But when I first started it, it felt like middle grade. So I was hard pressed to continue it. By and large, the reviews are positive. I fall into minority, which is not surprising to anybody because apparently I'm a really tough critic. I'm super hard to please. But I agreed with a lot of reviews in that it didn't feel like a fully formulated story. It didn't feel like we really got to know the characters, and I can't say what the fix for this book would be. My 2 thoughts are cut a character or cut 2 characters. My other is make it longer. That's the best way to fix anything when you need more time. But I can't say it was a bad book. It was hard to get emotionally invested in. The one emotion that it brought out of me was anger. And that was largely on Jasper's part because he was angry. And I never figured out why. But we are going to start with Claire. Claire is a senior, she's 17. She's a senior, yes, she's a senior. We open up, and this is a question that, to be fair, I did skip some of Jasper's chapters because I thought he added very little. In terms of 9/11, that's what I was looking for. And I felt like it was more about him and his personal life, and in some ways, Levithan's agenda, which we all have agendas. I'm not trying to put this in a negative light, and I'll get to that agenda in a minute. But I can understand why I may have missed some things about Jasper, like why he was angry. But I never learned why Claire, when we open this book, thinks that the school administration is at her room to tell her that her mother has died. Because 9/11 hasn't happened. The planes have not hit the towers. I mean, it's actually the first plane has hit, but they don't know it. So I do not know why she's packing up her stuff and is convinced that the administrator is there to collect her because her mother is dead. I was thinking maybe her mother is in a dangerous job. Maybe her mother is sick. Those are the only reasons that I would be prepared for that kind of news. But her mother is neither one of those things, so I have no clue. So I think that's one way that I disconnected with her. Aside from feeling like she felt like a middle schooler, I never got to that deeper level of her. And we get more to deeper levels with the boys just because of their circumstances. And my other issue was that the novel required a lot of like metaphysical thinking, and 9/11 is tough enough. I do expect a certain amount of that to a certain extent, but I was overwhelmed by how much higher thought Levithan was asking of me, especially for like a 200-page book. We open up, it is the day of 9/11. Unbeknownst to Claire or her classmates, the first tower has already been hit. Then they learn that the first tower had been hit. And I thought this was really nice, where I enjoyed the atmosphere and the setting Levithan put us in, because depending on how old you are, it depends on what you've experienced in your life. For me, technology was a slow build. The classroom setting that we're given is, okay, so we learned something happened, but we don't have a TV in our room. We don't even have cell phones. Like, cell phones were hard to come by. Even the TV that we do have is this big box thing sitting on a rolling tower that you push around from classroom to classroom. And the one that we do have, it doesn't get any reception. For me, my school, I believe by this point, largely did have a TV in each room, and it was mounted up in the corner, like at the junction of where the ceiling and the wall. They had no way of getting news, and internet was in its genesis. Room next door had a working TV, which is when they go over there, people are freaking out. In her school, which is all fictionalized, not many people had connections to the towers. Like, they didn't necessarily have family members who worked there. But then there's this one girl who did, and I thought it was interesting / annoying that there's one girl in her class who did not know this person, this girl named Jill, whose father worked in the Twin Towers. But she was extremely emotional and felt like it was of the utmost importance to be with Jill. It would have been okay if we'd had time to develop all this, but we don't. So in the end, I'm just like, I don't understand this whole scene here or this emphasis on this girl who doesn't know Jill being like, I need to be there for her. People are starting to freak out, and Claire says, I need to go to the lower school to get my brother Sammy, who is in the 2nd grade, I believe. She goes down there only to realize we have nowhere to go because they live 10 blocks from the World Trade Center. She just stays in the classroom with the teacher, corralling the students and making sure that everything is okay, and helping as parents come to collect their children, having no idea where her mother is and what's going on, because her mother doesn't have a phone either. So she calls her mother's office, but all she can do is leave a message. That's another reason I guess she decides not to leave the school, is because that's the only place that their mother would think to find them. So they are finally being evacuated, and this is the point in which their mother comes upon them, and, you know, happy family reunion. We skip to the fact that they can't go home because they live so close to Ground Zero that they're not allowed back within a certain limit. We see her and her family sleeping at some friend's house, and she's having issues with insomnia, and so she's feeling pretty adrift. And what she ends up doing one night is going to this park, and she sees a woman lighting candles in the rain. So there'd been like a memorial set up. I loved this part. I thought that this was extremely poignant, because if you know anything about 9/11, you know that they were expecting survivors, and there were none. They, one, did not expect the towers to pancake. And when the towers pancaked, this essentially pulverized everything and anything inside. So the only people to escape were the ones in like the bottommost 6 or so floors. All these thousands of people that they were expecting never came home. New York was suddenly filled with American flags, as was most of the nation, and then missing posters. It pulled on my heartstrings because it was the worst thing that could ever happen. You never know what happened to your loved one. That's why I wanted to read People Who Knew Me, because I thought that was what it was going to deal with, where a woman was able to fake her death and move cross country and become someone else. So, hey, that's such an interesting concept. Why would somebody do that? Why would they put their family and friends through that, like thinking that they're dead when they're actually not? It wasn't what I was expecting, but you know, go and check out the review if you want. She sees this woman trying to relight all of the candles. She approaches the woman and they start to relight these candles. At this point, really learns how to be centered within the tragedy of 9/11 and where her place is after all of this. She starts to get involved with causes and volunteering. She is sort of the centering force of this trio because she has been asking herself questions, these metaphysical questions that I was like, oh my gosh. Through her growth efforts, she helps center the other two and help them figure out to grow and move on. She knows Peter because they go to school together. She doesn't know Jasper, but she has seen him because at the party where he met Peter, she had also been there, so she recognized him. And I liked this moment too. It is actually more of Jasper's point of view than hers, but what I liked about it was as I said, he was really, really angry, and I didn't know why, and 9/11 did not help the situation. The first night that they run into each other again, he essentially is like, tell me about what you remember from this party, because it occurred, 9/11 was on Tuesday, the party occurred the weekend before, so it was kind of the last good moment before the world changed. And I enjoyed the things that she picked out, the things that she had thought she'd forgotten, how that helped her too, how it helped her get lost in something other than where they were. It was from the day of to a couple days later to like 6 months later to a year. At the year mark, we learned that she has decided to stay in New York. And that's where it ends for her. Now on to Jasper. Jasper had overslept. He was in college by this point. He was like a year older than Claire and Peter. And I, as I said, don't know why he was angry. He's Korean and his parents were over in Korea because his grandmother, I don't really know what to think about this because we don't get a lot of explanation. His grandmother, I guess, had some sort of ongoing health problems. Although later in the novel, when he goes to Korea, he's like, I don't know what kind of health problems my parents were talking about because she is in great shape. But they're there, he's here, and he is, I guess, has just been drinking to excess. He is not leaving the house. There's just something going on with him, some kind of inner turmoil. And he is woken by the phone. Are you okay? Have you seen what's happening? We're trying to get back. And he's like, what in the world are you talking about? He turns on the news and he's like, oh, okay. This is something that I didn't understand from him. And can I just say, my notes here were, it was a short book, forgettable book, had unlikable characters. I thought it was really heavy. Because of its length, I was very confused because Jasper is in a state of denial. He's getting all these emails from people making sure he's okay. He's super irritated with them because he feels like it's false sympathy. None of these people necessarily care about him outside of the fact that he's the only New York friend they have. And I was just, I don't know, Jasper, I skipped his chapters for a reason. But he gets in touch with an old high school friend named Amanda because she is still in town as well because their university hasn't started yet. She's saying, I'm gonna go give blood. I don't even know how long he takes. It feels like he took long enough to rewatch the news segment 3 times. If I were Amanda, I would have been like, I'm just going without you because it feels like it's probably an hour or 2 from the point where he says, I'll come get you, to when he's like, I'm on my way. He's rewatching the news, he's absorbing it, he gets into the shower, and he's in shock. only for, in the aftermath of that, for him to be incredibly angry, apathetic. He does not understand why people need to act so distraught. It's not such a big deal. Why do we need to be behaving differently because this happened? Yes, it's terrible, but like, why does this need to dictate our behaviors? So here was my first moment where I really, well, basically from Jasper waking up was when I started to disconnect from him. But he finally gets Amanda, and this is the point where I was worried about the direction of this novel. Not that Levithan can't say what he wants to say, but more so because it's not what I wanted from a 9/11 novel. We learn that Jasper is a gay man. They're given a survey, or a questionnaire really, and part of the questionnaire is, have you ever had same-sex sex? He has a really big issue with the fact that because he has or may have as a homosexual male, that automatically disqualifies him from giving blood, when someone like Amanda could have also been having intercourse with all kinds of sketchy people, yet she's not, because it was heterosexual relations. I get what Levithan, who is an advocate for gay rights, and a lot of his novels center around same-sex relationships. I understand what he's doing and why he's doing it, but my fear was, is this going to take over the plot of the novel? We do continue to get insight into this lifestyle and what it looks like in the early aughts, but it wasn't this big political statement that I was afraid it was gonna be. We get Peter's point of view, and at first Peter was my favorite, but then Peter's this huge like music lover, and it took over his storyline to the point that, again, it's all about, I mean, as a writer myself, I should be okay with this stuff, but I really hate metaphor. Like, I like it in theory, but I really dislike when everything that happens in a book or in a storyline has an underlying meaning. They're supposed to have their first date, and he, amongst this massive emails, Jasper sees one from Peter, and Peter's like, hey, I don't think it's a good idea considering the circumstances. From Peter's perspective, they keep loose contact until Jasper agrees it's a good time to try that date. But from Jasper's perspective, and we get Peter's perspective first, but I really just want to hop into Jasper. Jasper makes Peter out to be something of like this juvenile high schooler who's this huge annoyance to him, how he can't even remember what he looks like. And it honestly, some of it's affected by the whole 9/11 situation, but honestly, it just feels like he's really callous in that Peter, kept emailing him and kept bringing up the idea of going on a date and wouldn't let it go. And so even though he didn't really want to do it, he figured, well, why not? So from his perspective, he was going to make it as hard on Peter as he possibly could. One, in my opinion, to punish Peter, and two, almost to test Peter, to be like, is Peter dedicated to this or not? He has Peter meet him at his house. Granted, he's still home alone. His parents cannot get home. Then he's like, okay, we're gonna go to this neighborhood restaurant. It's a really awkward interaction. He doesn't necessarily want to keep the date going, but he does think Peter's really cute, and he feels kind of bad, so he suggests they watch Cabaret. This is what I really like having dual perspectives, is because Peter feels like Jasper is giving him nothing. But then from Jasper's perspective, he's like, this kid isn't picking up what I'm putting down. So it starts raining, and it's even later, so it's not safe for him to be on his own going home. Jasper doesn't actually intend for him to sleep on a couch. He intends for him to like sleep with him. Peter, he sleeps on the couch, and then Jasper, who admits that he's kind of dissociated, he comes out to try to like make up for things, and he's kind of feeling flirty. And then it's just really awkward, and he's really mean, and I feel so bad for Peter on both sides, either from Jasper's point of view or from Peter's point of view. Peter's out, he meets Claire, they become besties, and then he hears about Peter through Claire, and then he re-meets Peter at Claire's birthday, but Peter is in a relationship with someone else, to which Jasper brushes it off, acts like, well, good for you, but he's actually jealous, like Peter's the one who got away. At some point when he, for summer, is going to go to Korea for 9 weeks to visit his grandmother, he starts emailing Peter. I guess Peter has broken up with his boyfriend and they reconnect. Honestly, one thing that Levithan does that personally I don't care for, and it's not a practice that is encouraged in writing, he tends to go back in time and repeat things like, we saw this whole date from Peter's perspective, so why do we need to see it again from Jasper's perspective? Or we saw 9/11 from Claire's perspective, so then why do we need to then go and see it from Jasper and Peter's perspectives? I think if we had kind of picked up where Claire's left off, that would have been fine. And that's kind of how it felt with Jasper. So we jumped from Claire to Jasper, and because he's missed it all. But then when we get to Peter, and this is the point where I was like, how many narrators do I have? We travel all the way back to right after the first plane hits. And then we go through that entire morning, and I was just like, whoa. We see all of Jasper's emails to Peter, only then to see all of Peter's email responses back to him. So again, we were hopping back in time, and I just skipped them because I got the gist. We didn't even need Peter's responses to understand what happened when Jasper emailed him. We end with Peter's now out of high school and in college, and we see Jasper going to see Peter at his school, and this is the first time that they have seen each other since the birthday. They've been emailing and phoning, and they haven't actually been together. Peter's just really nervous because he is wondering if all of this is to atone for how Jasper treated him on their first date. Everything goes fine, and then they end up back in New York with Claire on her bed, and it was just a really unsatisfying ending. I honestly can't tell you, because they weren't all back together on 9/11. It was after 9/11, and I thought it would have been perfect if it had started on 9/11 and then ended on 9/11 with them together. Like, to me, that's a complete circle. So me in my delirious sick state, I said, I don't really care. I'm glad the book is over, so I'm just gonna take it where it is. It essentially ends when war is declared, and we have another of Levithan's basically personal statements on the war and the necessity for the war, which we can all have our opinions on that, but I don't know. Anyways, so now we pick up with Peter, who had ditched school to buy the new Bob Dylan CD, which again, it just threw me back because he's at the CD store, Tower Records, and I remember Tower Records. I remember going there at the mall, and I loved going through all of these CDs, and so I loved how it brought me back in time, which is exactly what we need in a book when it doesn't take place in today's world. Like, this was, I started it one night, and then when I picked it up the next day, I had to reread the whole thing, like the whole first Claire's chapter, and then this thing with Peter a couple times, because it didn't make sense to me, but that could just be to do with the fact that I was not 100%. Still not 100%, but I still made this like a 30-minute review. Good for me, right? He's there before it opens, and when the employee comes to open it, he tells Peter about it. So then Peter, and I liked this at first with the music thing, Peter could not listen to music. His whole life is about music, but he could not put his headphones back on and start listening because he knew everything was going to mean something different, and he did not want this event to change the way he felt about his music. Super powerful. Levithan had some really wonderful one-liners here. He really did. And then I felt like he took it too far. This is when I really liked Peter. I thought he was the strongest opener. He gets to this park and he sees the second plane hit. And I loved this moment because it changed everything for Peter. As much as I said this book wasn't very emotional, like this part is always very emotional for me because there is a specific before and after. And to actually see the planes hit, it's a definitive moment. From there, we learn how they're all connected. We see the disastrous date again. We get all this music stuff. He had been wanting to go see, or he had planned to see a Travis concert, but all of the bands had been canceling in the wake of 9/11, so he was not sure if Travis was actually going to come. They do, and the moment where the lead singer kind of stops things, and essentially this was supposed to be a sold-out show, but only a fraction of the people came. And to me, I thought this was a really interesting moment that Levithan actually didn't touch on. I thought it was where he was going, and it wasn't. Where Levithan mentions why the seats were empty because of the speech that the lead singer is giving. I thought he was going to be like, so how many of these seats are empty because people lost their lives? And that's not what he says. But to me, that was a hit. It hit me, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what a concept. That they're not empty because people aren't ready to go out. They're not empty because people changed their minds. They're empty because those seats had been purchased by people who never could make it. He's talking about the estimated number of people in this room or the estimated number of people who died in the Twin Towers, which if you know anything about 9/11, the estimated death toll was far higher than it actually was. There were a lot of circumstances that prevented people from being at work when they normally would have been. And around this time, I started kind of filtering through Peter's because I didn't care for the musicalness of it all, the musicness of it all, but I did like how he and Claire had become closer due to all of this, and they had bonded over the music and how they would speak one-liners to each other coming from songs, and then we would get lyrics of the songs and how we, beforehand, this is what it meant. But now, even though it's not about this, it so aptly applies to the before and the after and 9/11. So I enjoyed those parts. From there, that's when he runs into Jasper again. That's when the email, and they all end up with Claire in her room. As the novel went on, I didn't care for the writing style. I didn't like the characters. It didn't feel like a complete thought. Read it if you want. It's not going to take too much of your time. It took me maybe 4 hours, and that was not focusing entirely, and that was with a lot of interruptions. And then let me know what you think. So, bye.